She is a UCLA Bruin, a former pro golfer, and now a mainstay on Golf Channel. It is the great Kay Cockerill on Twitter at Kay Cockerill. I'm Bryan Fenley, who met Kay at Wilshire Country Club a couple years ago. Obviously, a big fan of her work, and I work on the radio in LA at Fox Sports Radio and do a little bit of work with UCLA as well. So this is a very fun connection. Kay is one of the pioneers of the sport, obviously a two-time Women's US Open amateur champ. That has only been done 4 times by a person since World War II. But now it's all into broadcasting for you, Kay. And what was that like, making the transition from playing to broadcasting with Golf Channel in 1995? And how was it so seamless for you?
I wouldn't say it was seamless. Uh, I was actually, I think it was in 90, must have been 94 in the summer. I was putting on a putting green in Springfield, Illinois, middle of America, getting ready to play another LPGA event. And our then commissioner, Charlie Meacham, came up to me and said, "Hey, have you ever thought of doing TV broadcasting?" And I was like, "No," as I'm hitting my 3-footers, grinding up 3-footers. And he said, "Well, there's this channel that's starting next year called the Golf Channel. They're looking for players to be commentators. I think you'd be great. I'll recommend you if you're interested." And I knew that that was a very important opportunity and point in my life and my career, because I had been struggling the last 3-4 years on the tour, just grinding through injuries, bad play, going back to qualifying school. And I thought, this is an opportunity that I really can't pass by. And I knew it was probably going to be initially an quote experiment to see how I liked working in television. Was I any good at it? Would they like me? And was it going to be a good fit? And you talk about seamless. I think if I had my actual interview, if it had been in a studio like what you're used to doing, and if I had to call golf shots right off the bat or do something in the studio, I probably would have failed miserably. But my quote interview was on the golf course in Orlando at Metro West, 9 holes, and so that was my turf. I was totally comfortable. I could be myself. They saw my personality, and I think just made sure that I'd be decent. I could complete sentences. I had a decent vocabulary and personality, and they hired me at that point.
I think you're just being humble, but I can see how having an interview on the golf course would probably make you a bit calmer through this all. And certainly your work has been so well received because you've been with the network for so long. And speaking of you handling so many interviews now, not the one being interviewed, but the one giving the interviews, what is it like when you come across an instance, Kay, when you are interviewing a golfer in the final round? They were supposed to win, or they were in the hunt,
Mhm.
and they had a disappointing final round, and there you are, one of the first people they see after they finish 18, and you're almost playing the role of comforting them, or you're trying to approach them in a way where you understand they're probably a bit sensitive given their round and where they thought they could be at that time.
Well, a perfect example of that happening recently was Amy Olson, who finished runner-up in the U.S. Women's Open in Houston in December. And she had the lead, midway through the back 9, and was caught and passed. And she, I have to interview her, and she's in tears over to the side. She's kept it together all day. Her father-in-law had passed away a couple days earlier. There was a lot of emotions going on. She really held it together, and it just kind of spilled out. And she was hesitant to even do the interview. And I totally respect that and understand it. And if she'd said no, I'd been fine with it. But I said, people really want to hear from you. Just, take some time. And she asked if we could tape it. And I said, no, that's not going to fly. We have to do it live. But I didn't jump in on her. I just kind of let it happen naturally, and asked one tough question at the end of the emotions of of trying to get through the death of her father-in-law and win her first major, and how did she handle her emotions, and she almost lost it at the end. But I kept that question for the end so that when she did sort of start to tear up, we were done. And I didn't want her to have to choke and cough through all the some of the more specific questions about the golf out there. But yeah, I remember interviewing a guy, Kyle Thompson, who toiled back and forth on the PGA and Corn Ferry Tour. And he literally missed it by one shot to get his card. And I think he three putt the final hole, and I had to tell him that he missed it. And it was so hard. And I hate doing interviews like
Yeah.
that. Of course, it's easier to talk to someone who's just shot the course record, or they just won for the first time, or for their, upteenth time, like interviewing Annika Sorenstam, who just made winning a habit. But sometimes you have to have those interviews, right? Because that's sports. There's the winners and the others. And in golf, there's only one winner, and there's a lot of people that play quite well during the week, but they just don't get the trophy.
You have to have a level of empathy, I would think, in those situations. And certainly as a reporter, dealing with that emotion, being sensitive to the player and what they're going through, whether it is a high point of their career, you catch them following a win, or a time where it's a disappointing moment for them. What is it about your charm, Kay, on the air that's been so well received by Golf Channel and its listeners and the golf community, and why you've been able to put together this career in television for decades and had so much success?
Well, thank you. I can only be who I am. And I remember in the beginning trying to act like, a
Sure.
sports announcer. There was a few times where I was trying to do too much, or trying to be someone who I wasn't. And I got good advice along the way from various people. But Donna Capone was probably one of my most, closest mentors initially, because we worked together in those first years. And she, along with many others, just said, you have to find your own voice and be your own person, because people will see through you if you're not being truthful. And golf in particular is such an intensely followed sport by maybe not the quantity of people that follow football and basketball, but the ones that are following golf are huge fans of the game. They're huge golfers themselves, and they can see through phoniness. So the golf background was there, the knowledge of how to hit shots, but how do I translate that to the audience? And I think you just have to be yourself. And like I tell a lot of people, if it's very subjective whether you like or dislike somebody on television or who's doing radio. It can have to do with their personality, how they look, the tone of their voice. And once someone likes you, they pretty much will always like you. And even if you say something silly, they'll think, oh, isn't she clever? Isn't that funny? And if you say something stupid, well, they just sort of gloss over it. But in a perfect world, if you're at home listening to a golf telecast and say there's 6 announcers, I would say if you loved 2 of them, you hated 2 of them, and you were sort of ambivalent about 2, that would be a winning situation, because it's just, again, it's very subjective. And I think if you can assemble a wide variety of voices and viewpoints, hopefully the fan at home can connect with a couple, and also will hopefully cover all the bases. Because, say, for example, I'm a little more into telling the story about how you got there, or what you've been working on in your game, or drills with your coaches, or family interactions. And some of my other coworkers are more into facts and stats and swing speed and ball launch and all that stuff, which is great too. But I'm not really going to go that direction, because that's not my thing. I might throw out a few important stats, but if we're all covering a sort of different basis, hopefully the person at home feels like they're hearing from a wide variety of points of view.
We're talking with Kay Cockerill of Golf Channel, former UCLA Bruin. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor for Fox Sports Radio. How did golf lead you to your husband?
That's that's a good question. So he grew up in a town, Corning, New York, upstate New York. We had a long time LPGA event there for some 30 years. One of the great small stops on tour. We were treated like rock stars there. Between Corning and Rochester, those were two great back-to-back tournaments we used to have. His family hosted a player, Sue Erdel was her name. She stayed at their house for 10, 11 years. So Danny grew up getting to know Sue. So he comes back from college. He just finished college at Ithaca College. And Sue had just fired her caddy, said, Danny, will you caddy for me? He pops in, caddies for her. They finished top 10. She said, how about you come on the road with me the rest of summer? And he said, that sounds great. I got nothing to do. So he goes out onto the road with Sue, and there's a couple other young caddies, guys just out of college, Evans scholars. And some of us young pros are hanging out with the younger caddies and going to parties or baseball games or whatever it is. And we met and became friends. And that's really where it started. And then that was in 1990. In 1991, he got a lot of reject letters that he had sent out trying to get a job in sports TV, because that's what he majored in Ithaca. And he said, I haven't found a job. How about I come out and caddy for you? So he caddied for me in 1991, and I married my caddy. What can I say? As he said, he's still my caddy today.
That was my next question, Kay, was does he still caddy for you when both of you go on the course?
No. He plays. He's a good, he's getting his game together. He's a 12 handicap. He works for the Giants baseball team, has been with them now for 25 years. So he's in management side, marketing. He came out, made him tote the bag again 2 years ago now, was it, when I played in the inaugural US Senior Women's Open. And I thought about getting a club caddy, a professional caddy, but I thought, no, this will be a lot more fun if Danny's toting the bag, and he's going to make me more relaxed and just keep me in the game and just provide good emotional support, which is what he did. And then he caddied the following year when I played in it again. And then last year's was canceled due to COVID.
So the recent times when he has caddied for you, how often do you listen to his advice?
Well, he's great with numbers. He is great with numbers. And he has watched, being a caddy out on the LPGA tour and getting to know players like Meg Mallon, Beth Daniel. He's hung around with some of the best in the game. He caddied for Melissa McNamara, who's now the coach at Auburn, and quite a few others. So he knows what it takes. He knows the practice. He knows the management of the game. And he would help me with, remind me of management issues, or if I hit a bad shot, help me to just let it go and let's go chase it and get the next one. But he would never tell me how to hit a shot. And I always read my own putts, and I always have, even in the early days. I rarely have asked for advice on the putting green, and that's just me. But I've always been a really good putter and had a great innate ability to read greens and read putts. So for him, it was more about numbers, getting me organized, getting me to the first tee as I was, sort of slightly distracted by chatting with friends and maybe hitting a few too many chip shots. Like, we need to get to the tee in 5 minutes. So
I love it. As far as your professional career, when was there a shot, or when was the shot when you were most nervous over the ball?
Whoa. You know what? It was probably before there's two instances that come to my mind. The first one, when I had won my first US Amateur, that next US Open I got to play in 87 at Plainfield Country Club. I was paired with Jane Geddes, who had won the US Open the year before, and Joanne Carner, one of the all-time greats of the game, Hall of Famer, who's just amazing. And when I saw that I had that pairing, I was shaking in my shoes. And on the first tee, I literally could hardly tee the ball up. My hands were shaking so much. But what did I do? I birdied the first 2 holes, and I was on the leaderboard like that. So I had this sort of crazy outer body experience that was working in a really positive way. Now, obviously, I didn't win the US Women's Open, but I did make the cut. And I had a great 4-day experience, but that was really nerve wracking. And I remember the first time I played with Nancy Lopez, it was started towards the end of the last 2-3 years of her career, when she was, still winning tournaments. And she was such a crowd favorite. And I got to play with her on a Saturday at DuPont Country Club. And I just remember the fairways lined with people. And it was a really cool experience because she was first class the whole way and was very complimentary from start to finish of my game. Of course, she was focused on her game. And the hardest thing was kind of the tiger effect of everybody moving around and sort of heading to the next tee when you still haven't finished out yet. So, but I really enjoyed that experience. And most of it was because she was so kind. And I still consider her a good friend today.
Speaking of somebody else who's very high on your friendship as far as who you look up to, Juli Inkster. And I wanted to ask you the role that she's played, not only in the game of golf, but on you as a person, as a broadcaster, and as a golfer.
Well, certainly. We grew up about 25 minutes apart, she in Santa Cruz at Pasatiempo on the 14th fairway, where I won my first US Women's Amateur. We're 4.5 years apart, so we missed each other in junior golf. We both got started late in junior golf, so by the time I was going at it, she was already in college. We missed each other in college, but when I was getting involved in golf and really kind of starting to fall in love with the game, she was in the process of winning 3 US Women's Amateur Championships back to back to back. And of course, that was huge. And that really inspired me because she was someone local that I could relate to. Even though I had yet to meet her, I had read all about her, I knew of her, and she's doing these amazing things. Fast forward to when I got out on tour, she had already been out on tour, winning majors, winning tournaments, rookie of the year, all that stuff. But she welcomed me with open arms and really became a big sister and was always there to bounce questions off of. And it's really been, though, probably in the last 20 years since I moved back to the Bay Area after getting married and really get into TV and out of competition, that we become closer friends because we do quite a bit with her family and her kids. Her 2 daughters are amazing, and her husband, Bryan, is a rock. So we've been very closely involved socially, going to sports events, playing casual golf, having dinners and parties at their house. Their house is kind of the hub of activity. And then when she got involved in Fox Television, it was funny because she leaned on me and came to me for advice on how should I do, or I'm frustrated with this, or I got really, what am I going to do in this situation? And it was like I was talking her off the ledge a couple of times. We're few and far between, but you can understand that when you're in a new medium and you're trying to be good at what you do, and there's lots of moving parts, and I would just give her advice and we'd talk about stuff and talk through things. And of course, then playing in senior women's opens together, we played practice rounds, and I got out of practice of how to play practice rounds. So I'm playing with Juli, and she'd go to the back of the green and chip a bunch of chip and runs. So I go follow her over there and do the same thing. Then she'd move to the front left bunker and hit bunker shots. And I'd go into the same bunker and hit shots because I'm like, well, whatever she's doing, I'm going to do, because she's got this whole thing down. She's been competing. It's amazing that she's now 60 and she still competes in some LPGA tournaments and just is so competitive and just loves to practice and prepare to compete. That's where we differ. I think I got a little burned out, or I just got too stressed out with all of that, where she thrives on it. And that's why she's able to, I think, keep her golf at such a high level for so long.
Both you and Juli are from Northern California, but you ended up playing college in Southern California, and you were a walk-on at UCLA. And now you're the only women's golfer in the UCLA Athletic Hall of Fame. How did all of that work out for you?
Well, I did. I just, I started into golf later, so I was not on anybody's radar in junior golf. I only played NorCal junior golf tournaments. I didn't play AJGA. I didn't travel all over to play these big events. So I was not on anybody's radar. But I had good grades in high school. I went down to visit UCLA on my own with my parents and hit it on a beautiful day after it had rained the day before. It was crystal clear blue, and I defy anybody to walk onto the UCLA campus and not immediately fall in love with it. So I knew that they had a great academics and great sports women's golf team. I also applied to San Jose State, and Mark Gale, the coach at the time, he and I laughed for 20 plus years of how he let me slip through his fingers and how he didn't recognize that I, could have been a great player. But anyhow, Jackie Steinman, she didn't really know about me either, but I introduced myself to her when they were up at Stanford playing in a tournament.
Oh.
And she helped secure me into the dorms and said, hey, here's the dates for trying out, and come down early and try out for the team. Well, I tried out and made the team. Then I went as sort of an extra player during the first quarter to a few tournaments, and I was posting some good numbers, beating a couple of the scholarship girls. And then after winter break, one gal was sick, one gal had academic trouble, so she brought me as the 5th player to San Diego State's tournament, and I won it. I won the tournament, and everybody's coming up to Jackie Steinman, who was, who had been there for 20 years or so. She essentially started the program. They're like, Jackie, where have you been hiding this secret weapon of yours? And of course, she's just as surprised as anybody. But from that point on, I was pretty much top 3 on the team. I earned a half scholarship the next year, and then full scholarship my junior and senior year. And then I stayed on for a 5th year to finish school and try to defend my U.S. Women's Amateur Championship, which I did that 5th year. And I also helped with the team and practiced with them as well. So yeah, pretty amazing that I would go on, to win 6 tournaments, which that record has now been passed by Bronte Law and Lilia Vu. But we have to keep raising the bar, and the younger players keep elevating to set new standards. And yeah, going into the UCLA Hall of Fame was certainly something I had never dreamt of or thought was possible. And so that was a huge moment.
Where do you feel like the game is, women's golf, when you were breaking in, when you were having your big breaks, like you said, when you started finding your ways at UCLA and then going pro, to what you're seeing now in this younger breed of golfers? It's such an international sport. What can be done more to bolster the game and grow it in a way that is possible?
Yeah, I think it's continually growing, particularly on the women's side. I mean, that's still aside, junior golf and women's golf is something that all the golf entities are trying to tap into, because they realize that there's still a lot of growth potential there. But even, when I was growing up, I never saw any women professionals in the pro shop or teaching. And now there's a very healthy LPGA teaching and club professional division, and or the women also joined the PGA of America and are teaching and mentoring young people and running golf courses. There's also there has to be almost twice as many golf programs now that have women's golf teams, not only in D1, but in D2 and D3. And it starts even before that in the high school level. We hardly had, if we had high school golf teams, they were usually just a men's team, and maybe a woman made it onto the men's team. Now there are as many women's high school golf teams. So it's really, the seeds are there planting. And the great thing is it's happening worldwide. Also, when I was first on tour, there were maybe 10 or 12 international players. And now international players are almost dominating most of the top 20 world rankings, particularly the women from South Korea. So they've bought into this golf game for women. And now that it's in the Olympics, which I covered the Rio Olympics in 2016, and I'm supposed to go to Tokyo to cover the Olympics that's supposed to happen this year in 2021. So now that golf is in the Olympics, that's just brought on even more countries to take it seriously, like China. So you're going to see a lot more, I think, even more and more international women, not only men, but women playing at a high level. And of course, they all want to come to the LPGA and play on the best tour in the world. So they might get their grounding on the Korean tour or the European tour or the Australasian tour, but the best of the best are going to migrate to the LPGA tour.
Kay Cockerill is joining us, former UCLA Bruin, now with Golf Channel. I'm Bryan Fenley with Fox Sports Radio and national anchor there. My final question for you, Kay, is speaking of the emergence of the game on the women's side, and now that recently Augusta has allowed a women's event, what I recall is that you were at Augusta and you got to do some broadcasting there. What was that scenario like from your perspective, seeing that at Augusta?
It was phenomenal. Of course, I was there all week. Steve Burkowski, who is one of our commentators, analysts, who's very knowledgeable, particularly with the college game and the amateur game. He and I kind of teamed up throughout the week, covering the first couple of rounds that were at another golf course, and then the women all got to play at Augusta on Friday, and then the top 30 made it to Saturday to play competitive rounds. So Friday was particularly interesting because I was on site doing some pregame shows, and it was just a sea of women and women's, golf bags. And it had to be the first time that many women were ever at Augusta. I mean, it was. I mean, women are allowed to play, and women are now members. But certainly in that quantity, there had never been that many women who were out there, and there were fans out there, and it just was a really cool experience. And then you couldn't ask for a better matchup or display of amazing golf than what we saw on Saturday with Jennifer Kupcho and Maria Fassi just going head to head, and Kupcho making eagle at 13 and shooting 67, and just, I think there were a lot of people wondering, how are the women going to handle the golf course? Are they going to be able to break par? Are they going to break 80? I mean, there were people that were doubtful that the women could handle that golf course. And it's not like they have advanced, up tees. They're basically playing the members' tees, which was a pretty good distance. So yeah, I was nervous for them. I was proud of the display, and you could just see the sheer joy in all these women's faces getting to play. I mean, how many people ever get to play Augusta #1 and then #2 play it in competition?
A powerful moment, especially to see where the women's game has grown to, and it's only going to grow more thanks to you and how much you are an advocate for the game. You are, Kay Cockerill, a proud Bruin and also a talented broadcaster for Golf Channel. Thank you so much for your time. This has been so much fun, having a spotlight on your career, learning about how you met your husband. I think that's a fascinating story, and getting into the mindset of you as a broadcaster and how your influences as a player affect you as you are doing commentary. I'm Bryan Fenley. Thanks again, Kay, for doing this.
Thank you very much. And I just want to give a quick shout out to Carrie Forsyth and Alicia Holmes, who are the coach and assistant coach for the UCLA women's golf team. They do a fabulous job, and it's really Carrie and Alicia who have elevated the team up into the consistently top level program that they have. And I'm proud of them, and I look forward to getting out to try to watch them when they come up north and play in Stanford's tournament.
Yes, that is going to happen, and I will make sure that they see that shout out. Kay, thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Bryan. Great to spend some time with you.